Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what side of the pond you're on, and welcome to Across the Pitch Belarus Premier League special. My name is Phil Kennedy, and as always for these episodes, I'm joined by Jonny Hibbard and now Ed Zalaski. I think this is your fourth time on now, Ed, so welcome to the show, guys, first and foremost.
Thanks for having us.
And I understand that there's a big game coming up in the Belarus Premier League, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot today. But just looking at the table, I mean, things have really stayed tight. Most teams have 3 matches left. There's a couple teams with a game in hand, but they're so far down the table it doesn't matter much. But let's just jump right into it, because Bate versus Shakhtyor. You've got Bate top of the table, 53 points. Shakhtyor, 52 points in second. Shakhtyor also has a 5-goal advantage in goal difference if that ends up coming into play. And if I'm correct, Bate won the first match. So if Shakhtyor were to win here, that would be a wash in terms of the head-to-head. And then goal difference would come into play, correct?
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds
By the way, Phil, I wanted to congratulate you on winning your bet that the Belarus title race is indeed tighter than the Bundesliga title race was. In fact, significantly so. So congratulations.
Well, right now we have 8th place Rue Brest, who is within 13 points, which I believe is the same amount that Dortmund finished behind Bayern, so yeah.
Yeah, so it's a huge game, and I think, particularly, you've got to feel for the people in England who are going to be robbed of non-league football action this weekend, and I think some of those are probably going to be drawn to this affair in Belarus. It's Shakhtyor at home, as you said. The capacity for this game
before
is 25.
But before we jump into that, you did mention something interesting here that we probably should cover real quick about those non-league games. So just to clarify, Bojo, as I found it called, announced that for the entire month of November that anything below the National League is canceled, is it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a curious thing there, because National League North and South, that's kind of the threshold. They were annoyed because they wanted to have playoffs at the end of last season and pleaded to be called Elite Sport for that reason, so that they could host the playoffs. Then the government decided that any elite sport, no fans were allowed. So suddenly you had Conference North and South begging to not be elite sport, but now only the ones labelled elite are allowed to carry on. So all of a sudden they're kind of happy again that they can keep playing. But my local non-league team, Baseford United, for example, will be shuttering the doors for the next month. So yeah, non-league fans will be at a loose end, and those were the only games people could actually go to, of course.
Well, it's just so hard for those clubs too. Yeah, I mean, the gate is the only real way that they make money. These aren't clubs that are making millions and millions of pounds from TV deals. So it was the only way a lot of them could survive.
Yeah, I mean, the National League is being kept running by national lottery proceeds at the moment. So I don't know how long that can go on.
So let me ask you this. I know we've gotten off track here, but this is interesting stuff. And you attend a lot of non-league games, and I assume that they're probably generally general admission. What's the average price that you pay to go to a non-league game?
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, because I'm a PhD student, I get in discounted. You know, if you pay your fees, you've got to get your discounts. So I actually get into Baseford United for the princely sum of £3, which must be about $5. Which is brilliant. I mean, they're a local club with a little bit of money behind them. The sort of third team in Nottingham. And actually recently, young Nottingham Forest fans who can't go and watch their team have got behind Baseford, and they've even started singing songs. We never had songs there, so it's brilliant. And, the money I save on the student discount, I give them back in beer. So,
there you go.
It all works.
Do they have a pound a pint after a win like they do in Accrington?
I don't think so. I think that sounds...
You should suggest that.
Sounds, dare I say, very northern indeed. And this is the Midlands. So.
well, let's jump into the Bate Shakhtyor. Now, this isn't a derby. This is just two teams that are top of the table, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I was going to mention that there is a 25% capacity limit at the moment. So teams are only allowed to use 25% of their stadiums, which means, and surprisingly, Shaktyor's ground, by, Western standards, if I can use that word, is only about 4,000 and something. It's actually a tiny stadium. And
right about the size of Accrington.
Yeah,
it's 4,200.
Which is crazy. So they're going to be barely over 1,000 fans for this big game. I shouldn't think there'll be any away fans. And sadly, I don't think that the capacity limits have got much to do with COVID restrictions. I think they've got everything to do with the protests that are still going on. So we won't go too much into that today, but just to mention that is still very much going on. There's still violence going on, unfortunately. So I think that's why capacity is being kept down. I don't really know what other rationale there could be.
Now, these teams are at the top of the table, I see, and they're both coming off of a win, and Shakhtyor actually 2 in a row. But I wouldn't call either of them in top form. I mean, in their last 5, Shakhtyor has 2 losses, 3 wins. Bate is 3-1-1. So I think they're in good form, but not top form, I would say.
I think that's fair. And what you also have, these are by far the 2 largest clubs in the country, at least in terms of salaries. So Tribuna actually just published some of the top salaries. And there are guys on Shakhtyor that are making pretty substantial amounts of money, about $25,000 a month, which is more than even Bate is paying right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's... I wouldn't think that there's any players on Phoenix Rising that are making $25,000 a month. That's a lot.
Yeah, so the average salary for Bate is somewhere between $5,000 to $7,000. The top is around 15. So Shakhtyor are really investing heavily in their squad.
Yeah, I think they've got to feel, if you're Shakhtyor, you've got to feel that this might be your year, because I'm not sure if they'll have this chance again. Of course, Bate had that absolutely terrible start to the season, eventually parted company with their coach in early autumn. And I think what I find really, really bizarre about this is that these coaches, Bate and Shakhtyor, they've only been in charge for like 3 or 4 games each. So whoever wins the title, I mean, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, you wouldn't think the two teams at the top. I mean, unless Jose Mourinho's involved or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I can't conceive of a league where you would be going into a title decider with 2, managers who'd only been there 2-3 games. It's bizarre. But Bate did have that terrible start to the season, I think maybe, and that coach had a terrible relationship with the fans, as I recall. So I suppose I shouldn't be that surprised. But yeah.
So as we talked about earlier, Bate won the first match was at Bate. This one is at Shakhtyor, as you mentioned earlier.
I should say it's at Shakhtyor Soligorsk. So you've made the old mistake. They say about Real Sociedad. It's a wonderful day in Sociedad today. Of course, the place is San Sebastian. So in the same way, we're actually talking about Soligorsk, which is a potash mining town in southern Belarus, not the glamour end of the country.
And for those who don't know, whenever you see the term Shakhtyor, that means miner. So these are all clubs that are historically the mining clubs, whether it's Shakhtyor Donetsk or Shakhtyor Karaganda in Kazakhstan. These are, the clubs of the miners.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in one of the early podcasts that the brightly colored shirts are supposed to symbolize the light when you come out of the coal mine. So that might explain this awful fluorescent yellow that's Shakhtyor Soligorsk play in. I don't know if you've ever seen that video of English football where a team's playing in those colours, and a player accidentally passes to one of the stewards on the pitch. Yeah. So I don't know if that's happened there yet, but yeah.
Well, I saw something where a player passed to a ref that was wearing a similar colored jersey. But saying, so who do you guys have winning this one?
I'm gonna go with the draw. I really think I don't think there's going to be much separating the two teams this weekend. I still think Bate will go on to win the title, but I will go for a 2-2 draw.
Okay, I'm going to go for this. I think I can see Shakhtyor nicking it. I don't know if that's my heart rather than my head. I think now that Isloch are mathematically, unable to win the league, I think I'm very much going to be backing Shakhtyor. Although having said that, they made slightly heavy weather of beating Belshina the other day. I mean, they won 5-1 in the end, but it took them over an hour to open the scoring. So in terms of the danger men, you've got to look at Skavish for Bate, who's been prolific this season, and Yakshaboev, our old friend who signed from Energetic, who is very much doing the goods for Shakhtyor now. So I think it's really, really nicely set up in terms of the protagonists.
Yeah, and with Yakshaboev, you have the young gun who will likely be moving abroad with Skavish. He came up through Bate's youth team, played for them from, I think, 2007 to around 2013, and then ultimately ended up back at the club after kind of bouncing around. And he's done really well for the club in his second tenure with them.
Yeah, you can almost
look up to the national team.
You can almost look at Bate. There's something kind of homegrown about them because they brought in the current coach is Lisowski. He was one of the coaching staff at Bate since 2013, I believe. And so there's almost a sort of if this works, it's almost a sort of Anfield boot room way of kind of bringing it through. Whereas at Shakhtyor, you've got much, much more turmoil. So I think the managerial change was harder to explain. It was two Ukrainians, actually, Vernidub, who quit for family reasons, and the new coach, Hrihorchuk. I'm really trying to pronounce this well because I'm supposed to know some Ukrainian, but yeah, and he came in as a replacement. And with the player turnover, they obviously lost. Is it Lisakovic who went to the Russian league?
Yeah, Lokomotiv Moscow.
Yeah, and he's doing pretty well, I've heard. So that was a big loss for them. They tried to get Jan Sane in the end. They got Yakshaboev. But much more turmoil with Shakhtyor, so it's kind of clash of styles in that sense.
Well, if we look down the table a little bit, I mean, it's probably going to come down to these two clubs for the title with only 3 games left. But there's a total of 5 teams that are within 6 points that are kind of mathematically in it. You have Dynamo Brest, who is now at 48 points. And then Neiman and Torpedo are both at 47 points. What do you guys think is going to happen with those guys? Do you think any of them could make a late push for second, or do you think that they're kind of competing against each other for the European spot?
Well, I suppose I'd say that the cream is rising to the top, really, because, we talked very early on about the biggest spending clubs, Bate, Shakhtyor, Dynamo Brest, Dynamo Minsk. And it's not out of the question that despite everything that's gone on this season, that could end up being the top four. I also think Bate and Shakhtyor have got to be slightly careful because actually Dynamo Brest is in a really good run of form, and it could still clinch the league, if those teams are not firing. So I think Neyman are gone. Sadly, I think they're a spent force. And getting below that, Torpedo have been so reliable this season. And they've taken on these journeyman South American footballers, but they've just got this ability to reliably churn out results, and I think that they have got a shout for third as well.
Well, you took what I was actually going to say about Dynamo Brest. They have been just on a superb run. They had a bunch of games in hand, from some that were postponed earlier, and they've done really well to come storming back up the table. So I think that I think they are the favorites for third place, just given the current makeup of the table. Their stars have been playing well. And I mean, again, they're one of the bigger spending teams, so they should be that high in the table ultimately. I don't think they'll catch anybody for second. If, Bate or Shakhtyor, if one of them win, then they have a shot at second. But given the way things are going, I think they will end up third.
And what do we think about Isloch for Europe? I think just a little bit too much to do now. I know our WhatsApp group still believe.
That's what I was going to actually ask you guys next. So Isloch right now at 44 points. They've had 3 draws in a row, so they haven't been losing, but they haven't been winning either. Right now in that 7th spot, they are basically what you would call the last team in the top half of the table. Would you guys call that a successful season if they finish where they're at right now?
I would be disappointed with 7th, given the way that the season has been and kind of where the expectations were. I would hope to be around 4th or 5th, and hopefully with like 50 points. I think the recent matches that we've had, there have been some where we've lost 2 points rather than 1-1. It's still a chance. I think we can finish 4th. And depending on how, there's a possibility that the 4th place will also get a European spot as well.
Yeah, I mean, alternatively, I'd love to see Isloch really go for the cup. So that might be the way out. Yeah, broadly speaking, I'd want to be slightly higher just because of the run of form we've had. But obviously, having said to you last time round that Jan Sane was a luxury, I'm not sure. Probably made the difference in the last 2-3 games, and we'd be just a little bit higher. So and it's difficult to say. There was obviously some weird financial turmoil at the club before the Jan Sane transfer went through, but they seem to be back on track now. The new training pitch has just been finished, and that looks great. So I think we'd like to be a bit higher, but I think there's an inevitability about Dynamo Minsk have suddenly learned how to win games from being absolutely useless for most of the season. Torpedo are reliable, and like I say, I think I'd probably see us pipping Neyman at the moment, but probably 5th or 6th is where I think Isloch will finish.
And I think the other thing that we had, some injuries again, right when we were starting to play well, and then players getting injured again. It's been frustrating.
And by the way,
Minsk have been superb again.
Nobody knows where Jan Sane has gone. I mean, as far as I know, he still hasn't made an appearance for Black Stars of Mali, and we're beginning to think that it's some kind of front for the agent to own the player and sell him on, like something like was done with Carlos Tevez all those years ago.
Well, there were right after he left us, there were some stories in the press linking him with a move to some of the smaller clubs in the Russian Premier League. You know, the kind of move. Yes. Yeah, that was the club. And moves that would make sense, but it doesn't make sense why he would go to a mid-table team in Mali and then go to Russia unless where he is currently registered is some sort of holding spot for the agent.
Yeah, so I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of it. But
those are the kinds of things that never come up in the NFL. Well, let's just take a quick look at the rest of the table because, you've got Root Brest in 8th, and you know they've actually had a probably a better season than their record reflects with a plus 16 goal difference and only a 10-7 record, and they're not in great form either. They've got a draw and a loss in their last 2, but I mean, once you get below 8th, it really drops off, and that's where you start getting into the negative goal difference teams. And then if you get to the bottom at the relegation, it looks like Smolovici and Belshina are all but done. Smolovici already mathematically, Belshina almost mathematically done. So that relegation playoff is going to come down to Gorodia and the world famous Slutsk. So who do you guys have in that one when that ends up coming up inevitably?
I would pick Gorodia just for personal reasons. I would prefer to see them stay up. They have they've had a decent run in the Premier League the last few years. They have a nice little stadium. They have a relatively active fan scene as well. So I think they're a nice club to have in the Premier League. So I'd rather see them stay up. So I'll pick them to finish 13th, Slutsk to finish 14th.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd looked at this a few weeks ago, I think it was looking like there was every chance that Slutsk were going to drop into the bottom 2 and the Belshina were going to catch them. And Belshina, if you ask me, they've bottled it, really, because I think they probably could have done it, if they'd had a bit more to them. It looks very much at the moment like Slutsk are going to be going into the playoff. And that could be fascinating because of the teams that could come up from the first league, which is the league below. So the first league is still very, very much unsettled. So the top 3 are Sputnik, Gomel, and the famous Krumkachi. And in fact, if you had Krumkachi against Slutsk, I think that'd be a fascinating context just because of the sheer level of international interest. Both of those teams have got big international followings.
Yeah, that would be an interesting game in terms of team names, too.
Well, I think it's funny with Krumkachi, just with them being the Crows, you kind of have a parallel, and especially with the way that the club is run, even down to the shirts, there's a parallel with the one lower league American club, Minneapolis City, just who are also the Crows, and they feature the bird predominantly in their crest. And so I think it's really impressive what they have done, and especially given that they had players that were imprisoned for protesting earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think Isloch fans want Krumkachi to come up because we kind of hate them, but it's friendly hate, if you know what I mean. If that makes any sense. So I think that's...
it makes complete sense. I don't think that the Yankees would want the Red Sox to get relegated, for instance.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's just a natural rivalry, and I think for us that's probably it. But I should also give a Arsenal Dzerzhinsk in 4th, probably just because my mother-in-law actually comes from Dzerzhinsk, which is just on the edge of Minsk. It's a small town, and strange fact, Dzerzhinsk, it's named after Dzerzhinsky, who was the head of the Cheka, the hated Soviet secret police that were the forerunner of the KGB, and not a nice guy by all accounts. But the strange thing is that in Belarus they still have these places, street names and things that are named after Lenin and other communist figures, whereas in Ukraine and some other countries, all of those names were changed completely, all of those old statues removed and so on. Anyway, I digress. So, for me personally, it would be interesting to see Dzierżynsk do well.
Well, and if there are any Arsenal fans listening, they currently have playing for them Alexander Hleb's brother, who has been kind of a journeyman around Belarus. He spent a lot of his career with the old MTZ, Partizan Minsk, whatever you want to call them. And now he's, well into his late 30s, and he's still playing.
Good for him. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'm just kind of looking at the schedule for the week coming up. Now, we do have a game tomorrow that I don't think anybody's too interested in. But I mean, really, other than the big Shakhtyor versus Bate, it seems like a lot of good teams against bad teams. Isloch and Minsk on Friday, I mean, that really looks like about the next best game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a derby as well of sorts. And, with any luck, you'll get people from both sides in the Tractor Stadium. And, I've kind of got used to the Tractor now, but I really liked playing at FC Minsk's little ground early on in the season. So I still feel like there's a sort of landlord-tenant rivalry going on there.
There definitely is. And I personally kind of like playing at Shakhtyor just because it's one of those old grounds. And I know it's not in the best shape, but it just has so much more character to it than, some of the more modern stadiums in Belarus.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it must have been a wonderful place to watch football in the summer. Probably a bit less wonderful now that it's getting quite a lot colder.
Yeah, I can only imagine that this time of year in Belarus is probably not prime football weather. Do you think that's going to have any effect on the outcome? I know that you said that for instance, like Bate has a lot more local guys and Shakhtyor has a lot more internationals, it sounded like. Do you think that could be a factor that would favor Bate with the weather?
Earlier in the season, I would say yes, but at this point, a lot of these guys have been playing in Belarus for long enough. I think they've all more or less gotten accustomed to it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Bate have got an Icelandic player. I don't know if you picked up on that. So his name is Willemsen, and I have really no idea why he would have gone there, but he made one appearance for the Iceland national team because, as you can guess, in a country that's small by population, you haven't got that many people to choose from, or to ask off the fishing boats to come and play for your national side.
Well, I know the Iceland national team did pretty well in the World Cup, and they qualified in 2018. But then I also remembered reading an article. There was some guy in Canada that I guess his family was from Iceland, and he traced back and found out that he was related to 19 of the players on the Iceland team or something like that. So that tells you.
Well, and this is Willemsen's second season now with Bate. He joined from one of the more mid-tier teams in Iceland. And so, I think he struggled in 2019, but I think he's come a little bit more into his form the second season. He scored an absolutely, I'm sorry for using this pun, especially with Iceland, just a thundering strike a few weeks ago. I mean, just absolutely hit the hell out of the ball. And, his father was a footballer as well.
Yeah, he's a huge guy, isn't he? 6'3". So he's one of those sort of intimidating figures, I think.
I can only imagine the size of stadium a mid-tier team in Iceland plays at. They probably have more boats than people.
Yeah. So, I think the weather is not going to phase in Iceland. At the moment, it's 7 Celsius and raining in Belarus. So, I think that's par for the course for most Northern European footballers. My game pick of the weekend, I think, is actually Dynamo Brest against Torpedo, because I think either of those teams, if things go a certain way, has potentially a lot to lose, actually. Like I said, Torpedo, pretty reliable, but I think they are hitting the immovable object now in terms of Dynamo Brest. So I think that's going to be probably a decent game. I think that's going to be the nice warm-up game to the big one.
Yeah, and that's the one that leads into Shakhtyor Bate, so that'll be a superb game as well. I think Dynamo Brest will win. They're hosting, so my money would be on them if I were a gambling man.
Yeah, sad to see Energetic as kind of the shadow of their former selves. I mean, I know that the guys who've been following Energetic were saying how long ago it seems since that long range special beat Bate all those months ago, and I think that it's just becoming a bit joyless for them now. So I feel a bit sad for them. So Belshina Energetic is suddenly quite an open game from what would have been, quite an easy game for Energetic a few weeks ago.
Right. I mean, if you compare the form of the two teams, Belshina actually are coming in better form than Energetic, only from the fact that Belshina won their last match.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that Belshina has any chance of pulling it off? I mean, they are at home.
I think a lot depends on what happens to them on Wednesday against Slavia. If they beat Slavia, they're 4 points back of Slutsk with 3 matches to go. So it's possible they'll have a little more wind in their sails. But if they don't win tomorrow, I don't think they have a shot.
I mean, time's really running out now for everyone. I think that's the kind of big key to this. And it's amazing, really, to think that all those extra games that haven't been played, those have all now been played now. We've all caught.
Here's what
all go into the weekend on 27 games.
I mean, here's what I see with Belshina is they do have the game in hand at 7 points back. Even if Slutsk was to lose all the rest of their games, Belshina would still either need to go at least either 3-1 or 2-2-0 over those 4 games. That's a tall order.
Yeah, I suppose the only thing we're forgetting is how much the Belarus League has surprised us this season. There's always been, every weekend there's been an upset or some kind of chaos result. And so, let's hope it stays the course and we've still got, 1 or 2 other twists and turns before the end of the season.
Well, it certainly has been exciting. That kind of ran through any of the questions I had for you guys. What else did you guys have for today?
Nothing else, actually.
Yeah, same. I think we hit everything that I wanted to talk about.
Well, excellent. I really enjoyed doing these Belarus episodes with you, and I assume that we'll do one last season roundup after the 30th week matches.
Yeah, sounds really good.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and we'll also have the playoff to preview as well, and so I think that'll be worth doing.
And hopefully we'll be previewing from Kachi coming back up to the Premier League.
I do just want to, without putting a damper on things, but I do just want to say we're still thinking of the people in Belarus who are still having quite a hard time of it. Protests have been going on now 2-3 months, so I just want to say that we're still thinking of those people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I look forward to the final 3 weeks of the season and chatting with you both again about 3 weeks from now. And thank you again, as always, for joining me. And you have a great evening. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.